What's up, gamers? I'm going to be doing a hopefully short recap of the Clifton Park PQ that I played at this past Saturday. Meant to do it a little earlier in the week, but time did not permit it. So this is the deck I played. I will be going in the deck construction a little later, and I will compare it to the list that I ran 2 weeks prior at RSG and talk about why the changes were made. First, to just quickly go over rounds, these were my matches. Um, the first four, not really much to talk about. This deck is highly favored into the various versions of Boba. The fourth Boba Yellow round, the fourth round against the Boba Yellow was the one that I came the closest. I think he had me to 29 in game one, and I believe it was primarily off of a lurking tie, but I eventually got the player was main decking lurking ties. Actually, a lot of these yellows were main decking lurking ties, so I was very happy with having the 6 answers in main deck that I chose to keep. These one of the points, one of the deck building points was do I drop that I was discussing with my teammate that was building this deck with me was do I drop these lurking tie answers and or at least some of them to the side just because they can plunk up the main deck a little bit, but it worked out very well having them in the main deck. I was always able to find it when I needed to. I answered, I think, 3 lurking ties in one of the games in round 3. He had one on curve, and then he had one on the flip turn, and then I think he had one after that. Snoke was also very strong in those matches because once you resolve Snoke, it's just over. That also against the Boba Red in the top 8 match. The Han 1 Yellow was extremely hard, so after the first 4 rounds, which were fairly easy aside from one game, Han 1 Yellow was by far the hardest matchup and against one of the best players playing this game, Alex, I can't remember his last name, but he goes by Alex the Greatest. That one was on stream. I played him again on stream in the top 4, quote unquote, because it really wasn't supposed to be that, but I'll get into that later. The deck is not designed to beat Han 1 Yellow at all. I was not expecting any Han 1 Yellows to make it past a field that I was projecting to be like 30 to 40% Bobas, because the deck has a very bad matchup into Boba Yellow, Boba Green, and Boba Red. I ended up pulling him though. He ended up not hitting any Bobas up till round 5. Ended up pulling him in round 5, and it wasn't even close. The first round, the round in top 8 was a bit closer. The single target discard, like I think he opened Spark a lot of the games. Going Spark, and then after sideboard having Kira, he had Bodhi, I think, most games as well, and then Bodhi is essentially a 2-for-1, and then the only way I could really 2-for-1 it back is with enticing or getting to 6 resources and then using Bounty Hunter Crew. The issue is getting to 6 resources can be a little hard against that deck, especially if they're doing the Tech DJ combo on curve, but even if they don't do it on curve, on the 5 resource turn, they could flip on and pull out a DJ anyways, even without the tech, which he DJ'd me many times throughout the 4 games we played. I think in the time that I met him in rounds, I was stuck on 6 resources, like 5 to 6 resources in both games. They were very long and grindy games. I still need to go back and rewatch them. Because he curved out so well, I didn't really have a window to win those, but he did say that he agreed with me staying on 5 to 6 resources and not really going down to no cards and playing off the top of my deck, just because I can still have the potential to grind him out as long as I am maintaining some type of hard, not advantage at that point, but like trying to stay even with him on cards. He gets a lot of resources, like 10, 12 resources, these long grindy games. I'm playing on 6, but in terms of the cards we're actually playing, I'm somewhat keeping up with him because I'm converting potential resources into cards that I can play. He took both of them probably around like round 13, 14 plus. The decks were getting pretty thin without any milling going on. And I will get into why that matchup is bad when we start looking at the deck. It's not a matchup I prepared for. The 2 Sabine ECLs were both extremely close. One, Of the 3 games, one game I just ran away with by in both matches. My opponent missed a turn 1 play in one of the rounds, but which is one of the games I ran away with. But in the 2 matches, I ran away with one game in each of them, which revolved around getting an early Pershing, an early client, and then just bringing it from there to a stable board state, and with the client still alive, and then just healing every turn, mitigating some amount of damage. Like if they do get an attack off for 4 or 3, the client is still healing me for 1 or 2. And then if it ever gets to the point where they don't have anything out and the client's just able to put the bounty on their play from that turn, I heal for the full 5. Like it's not just like mitigated healing, it's just straight up healing. 2 games in the matches I just got ran over. Like they just curved out really well. They had initiative, curved out really well, and I couldn't do anything. And then 2 games were in each match. 1 game in each match were extremely close. I will say that the what I remember most about these matches was just the fighting to get the client established, and then if I got the client established and could get to a stable board state from there, it is almost impossible for them to win. One of the games I did actually end up decking out, so one thing that I'll talk about when we look at the deck is even against Sabine, this is a fatigue deck, and I don't have the tools necessarily to be a fatigue deck because I am not playing tech in the main deck, and I am resourcing restock game 1 and siding it out game 2. I ended up with 0 cards in my deck while the Sabine player still had 12 left, so like 12 or 13 left. And I had to win through damage at that point, which I do have the tools to win. A big reason why I hadn't been able to win through damage at that point is because the Snoke, and Avenger, which are my 3 finishers in main deck. This was game 1 and I think round 7. Snoke, and Avenger were in my bottom 4 cards, and my 2 bounty hunter crews were in my bottom 6. So a lot of a lot of my units and my ability to recur mill were all in my last few cards, but I ended up pulling it out, taking fatigue damage, I think, to 29, and then took the fatigue damage to 29. I was at 25, healed to 23 with Make an Opening, took fatigue to 29, and then killed them that turn. It's very interesting how with this version of the deck, which is very different than the version that I played, or is interacting with Sabine in a very different way than the version that I played at RSG, is able to just fatigue out a Sabine. Top 8, the Boba Tarkin, the Space Boba. This matchup is kind of hard to evaluate. I think the hardest part of it is if they go wide on turn 1 with like multiple ground 1 drops, which this guy wasn't playing. The only ground unit he was playing was Bazine, so he was only playing 1 space unit a turn. And at that point, I do have enough density of removal to just be like, okay, I'm going to answer that, I'm going to answer that, I'm going to answer that. Lurking Tie and getting a buffed Lurking Tie is probably the hardest thing, which I was faced with in game 1. But I dug for an Entrenched from an Enticing Reward. I believe it was non-unique, placed on a non-unique unit, so I did end up having to discard a card, but like it was just like, okay, I need to find an Entrenched here. Dug 10, found an Entrenched, which like Enticing Reward's just so good. And was able to stall from that point till Snoke. One of the pain points there was Swoop Down, which she ended up using the Swoop Down on the Entrenched Lurking Tie to kill my Snoke when I played it. It did clean up enough of the board and then let me buy enough time till the second Snoke, and then that closed the game through damage. There was a little controversy in the top 4. I had told Alex that I thought we were playing each other, which was just a huge oversight on my part. I've been running tournaments since I was a teenager. Like I've been helping local communities. I was like a referee at a local tournament called NJ Halo, or King of the Couch, KOTD. I was the head referee for Gears of War from like the time I was like 14 or 15 to like 17. I had a lot of ties with MLG. I was running tournaments online. So the fact that I messed up saying like, oh, I'm 3rd seed and I'm supposed to be on the same side of the bracket as 1st seed, I'm still not sure why I messed that up so badly. He's like one and four are on the same side, and two and three are on the same side, and I was three and he was one in terms of seeding. So I was initially paired against the Sabine ECL that I played in round six, Chrono from KTOD, which I'm a lot happier about that matchup. It's about a 50-50 against a highly skilled Sabine, compared to a Han 1 yellow, highly skilled Han 1 yellow player, which I'm reasonably unfavored into. Like, I would say as much as potentially 70% unfavored into with this version of the deck. And then Alex apparently said something to the judge after we sat down and basically were starting to play, and then the judge swapped it without actually checking if it should be swapped. And then I didn't say anything because whatever reason I had in my head, 3 seed and 1 seed were supposed to be on the same side of the bracket. Then Alex and I are about to start playing, and then somebody makes a comment, wait, no, the pairings were right the first time. And then there was this whole thing, like, do we switch back again? And people didn't want to switch back again, but I was like, well, this isn't really fair to me. I was fine with playing the opponent that I sat down against, and now I'm playing somebody that I'm very unfavored into. Then there was a big discussion about it, and I was like, okay, well, even if I beat Chrono a second time, I would then most likely have to play Alex in finals because Boba, the other top four player, was another Boba Red player, and the Boba Red player was just scooping and going home. But I was like, in my head, I was like, well, would this player actually scoop if he was against Alex? They're both coming from the same area, both had like 4-hour drives. The other three top four players are all from the KTOD area. Um, it was a mess. I wish it had been proper matchups. I would have been able to see if I actually could have gotten top two then, because I know I'm not beating Han 1 yellow, but I have a 50-50 against the Sabine ECL. And then if Alex actually did play against the Boba Red, it is a bad matchup for him, so maybe the Boba Red wins, and then that is a slightly favored matchup for me. So, like, this deck could have potentially won the entire event. So I'm pretty disappointed that I didn't get to see if that happened. It very upsetting, but it is what it is. Alright, so let's look over the deck a little bit. And I also want to compare this to the list from RSG from weeks before. So this is very different from the RSG list that I top 8'd with. It's, I think, almost... I'm not going to do the exact count right now, but I think it's around 18 cards different. The list from RSG, this is the list from Clifton. Just briefly mentioning how the RSG list was designed, it is primarily looking to still pull Bobas and then hinge against Sabine. Same concept that I was going into, that I was using for the Clifton list. But this is attacking Sabine in a different way. This is using Fire Spray primarily with McClunky to become a more tempo, well, not really tempo because I'm not playing tempo cards, but like being able to more mid-range, like more mid-range control style of a deck where it's like, okay, I control their first few turns, I find a turn to play Fire Spray, attack with Fire Spray, the turn it comes down for 5. Next turn, attack for Fire Spray again for 5, so this is 10 total. And then still within that same round, I McClunky it back to my hand and play it again. And that's 15 damage with over the course of 2 rounds. It's actually something I ended up using a lot throughout that course of that tournament, and something that I'm going to be keeping in mind for the future, even into set 3. Because I ended up using it against Boba Yellow, I ended up using it against Boss Green in that event. There were multiple games where just the ability to just push 15 damage over 2 rounds just closes them. Especially with the 25 health base of Sabine, but again, even with these 30 health bases, if I've gotten some chip damage down, all of a sudden they're just dead because they take 15 damage in 2 rounds. The other big difference about this list is it's going for a Bosk mid-game, establishing Bosk on the board, and then using that to just ping 2 damage with the events constantly to just make an opening into essentially a 4 damage event. One of the downsides to Boss compared to my set 1 list, which I should probably have one of those up too, is like I'm not running No Good To Me Dead, I'm running more upgrades, I'm not running repairs main deck. Another big difference is I don't have client in this list yet because I'm trying to mitigate the unit count. I'm trying to keep the unit count low so that Greedo's trigger hits as consistently as possible, because the trigger hitting is one of the most important things in beating Sabine. It becomes a little less important after McClunky's added, and even less important after client's added. So what ended up happening was my friend suggested, like, okay, or my teammate suggested, like, okay, why don't we just change Fire Spray to client? Like, what if we just got client on the board and are able to stabilize the game that way? We don't need to kill them. We just get client on the board and we maintain health. And one of the things that he found in playing Boba Green, because he was testing Boba Green a lot of the time, was Charleston was a really good backup plan against Boba Green. These Boba, you don't need to play cards early against Boba Green, so it's very easily to get the 6/6 Charleston on turn 3. And if you have the 6/6 Charleston on turn 3, they attack into it with Boba's armor, and it's left with 5 health after the Boba's armor, and then you can just take it down. And that's the backup plan. The primary plan is to just Bazine it, like smuggle Bazine on 4 resources and strip it, and or just what's most likely going to happen, because you don't activate the super laser technician, so they have to have specific. A lot of the decks are also off of Salacious Crumb. So without Salacious Crumb, they can't ping their own Super Laser Technician, so that just turns off Super Laser Technician as ramp. And if Super Laser Technician's turned off as ramp, they need specifically resupply and Boba's armor to make that line work. And they're not going to hit that often. I think I forget what the math is. I want to say it's under 20%, but without actually double checking it, that was one of the issues in my last video. I was pulling numbers that I'd done earlier in the day, and they were a few percentage points off. I want to say it's under 20% that the chance of resupply and Boba's armor by turn 4. And if they're not doing that, then I could potentially do other stuff on turn 3, turn 4, and then just Rivals Fall on turn 5 if they're going to go for a line that isn't like that. So Rivals Fall is a very good primary plan, Bazine's a very good primary plan, and then Lieutenant Childson's a good backup plan. And in the one matchup that I did play against the Boba Green, they just didn't have it at all. So I didn't even have to worry about it. I actually was able to just Power of Darkside the Boba on flip and have another unit to play in front of it. So yeah, so that's how we came to Charlton. Charlton's also pretty good against Sabine, as, again, primarily a backup plan, because the main plan is to take down the Sabine on flip. But what the way it works is you wait for them to spend their resources. If they don't spend their resources, then you just continue passing. And then if they bring Sabine out before they spend their resources, then just take down Sabine. This is to deal with Darksaber. If they do spend their resources, or I just don't have takedown, I try to still bluff them into spending their resources, and then I can play Charlton as just a 5/5, and then 5/5. The 5/5 eats Sabine and eats like K2SO with 1 health left, and then still enforces their first action if they have Poe into hitting the Charlton instead of the Boba. Then Boba can hit into the Poe and still have 1 life left over if needed. It just sets up a lot of really good lines against Sabine. Very good against Boba Green, and it's still pretty good against Boba Yellow. So against the 3 decks that I'm trying to target, it's very strong against as a potential backup plan. And in order of prioritizing, it was Sabine first, because I want to make that matchup as close to 50-50 as possible. Because I'm always going to be favored into Boba Green and Boba Yellow, and even Boba Red a little bit. So make Sabine as close as possible, and then focus on Boba Green, Boba Yellow, still maintaining that as a win. And then after that, we were looking at Han 1 Yellow as like a way, because like this deck is gonna have issues with it, and this is a big reason why this deck is weaker to it is we're running a lot of cards that don't interact well with it. Charlton just gets bounced, which they don't have as much. Like it's just Waylay really, but all of the early turn plays don't actually. This is more so than Charlton. All of the early turn plays don't actually kill their units, because they're just going right into 3/4s. And then Cloud Rider doesn't kill anything, Mercenary Gunship doesn't kill anything, but Clunky doesn't kill anything. Greedo only kills with his trigger, and this version of the list is now up to 23 units, which is a very high percentage of the deck. It's like that's just with base rate of like a 46% miss rate, which is insane compared to a base rate of 30% for my set one list. Even going lower, I had it as low as a 22% base rate of missing, so it was a 68% hit rate. Um, sorry, 78% hit rate in some of my set one lists, just because of how important that Greedo trigger was against Sabine. But now with the McClunky package, Mercenary Gunship, Cloud Rider, adding Lieutenant Childson, adding Client, being able to just curve out with removal against Sabine, the Greedo trigger isn't as important. But now against Han 1 Yellow, none of my early stuff interacts with it well, so I don't really want much of that. I don't necessarily want to be on Childson because they're doing stuff like Spark of the Rebellion on turn 1, they're doing stuff like Bodhi on turn 2, which is stripping cards from my hand. So Bosk is a lot better in that spot. Bosk is also a lot better to just ping stuff, so then the 3 damage stuff can actually kill it. The biggest concession to Han 1 Yellow that we made in this list was adding a second calculated lethality, so that we have more ways to interact with the Tech DJ combo. Calculated lethality in general was phenomenal in this. Dropping Avengers to lower the curve and to more one-to-one removal was very, very strong. One of the big things from this list to this list is our top end is a lot lower. Partly because this deck can just be played as a fatigue deck, not even necessarily a mill deck. So what we saw in EU the week prior was 2 fatigue Bobas, and I'm using fatigue specifically instead of mill because they were only running 1 vigilance. The plan for the fatigue Boba is to just continually answer what the opponent is doing and using client to just always stabilize health or heal health. And then you just vigilance like right at the end, or use vigilance and then bounty hunter. You have 3 bounty hunter crews in those versions, and then you just like basically it's just very late in the game. You just end up milling the last 6 or the last 12, if even. You just keep answering 1 for 1, and then you eventually get to your restock loop. They're also running tech in those versions too, and they're not even running Avenger. They're just running tech in those versions to make sure they always have access to restock, even if they have to resource it. So we took a lot of inspiration from those in developing this list. Another good thing to point out about this list is the Childson helps protect Pershing, the Childson helps protect the Boba flip, which were 2 really important reasons to add Childson. But this was all kind of a tangent. Getting back to this deck is really bad against Han 1 Yellow. It doesn't have boss. The early McClunky package doesn't interact well. I really want to have more of, not even sure what it would be. It would be stuff like probably I Am Your Father, potentially even Frozen and Carbonites or stuff like that. One of the big issues in the Han 1 matchup was me playing Enticing Reward and then having them Waylay or Cantina Bouncer their own unit to their hand. But that could be more, I can try to play around that a bit more. But even with altering this deck, I think it's still pretty weak to Han 1 Yellow. But I do think that this version, compared to this version, it ended up being with the Childson, with the Pershing, with the client, and like the Childson protecting those and protecting the Boba flip, and going down in curve, like dropping Avenger, dropping one Avenger, dropping one, was it 1 Avenger or 2? Yeah, 1 Avenger, 1 Super Laser Blast, removing the fire sprays, becoming something earlier in the curve as client. I think that made the Sabine matchup a lot better. Which already felt like it was near 50-50, maybe slightly unfavored, so I might be even underestimating this deck's ability to play in Sabine. It might be slightly favored now, and still maintain Boba Green, Boba Yellow matches. And then in the control mirrors, if there ever was a control mirror, most people are on Boskred, and because they're on Boskred, they don't have access to Bazine and Bounty Hunter crew at cost, which is normally huge. Even though I don't have the search, I think in the RSG list, yeah, I had the 2 searches and 1 restock package, which is very important in event control mirrors because of how low that deck is, like such a low percentage, such a low top 8 conversion rate, and blue yellow is already favored in it. I dropped that. briefly talk about the sideboard, like Avenger and Super Laser Blast are coming in for the grindy matchups, Bounty Hunter Crew's coming in for the grindy matchup, Two Fell the Dragons coming in for the grindy matchup, Calculated Lethality primarily coming in for Han 1 yellow, but also comes against Sabine. One big thing about this deck is client and top target, so against any deck, almost any deck in the game, I want 3 clients and probably no top targets. However, I want to hinge a little bit because, again, the main thing I'm preparing for is Sabine. So I'm pre-boarding a little bit against Sabine by putting top target in instead of the third client because it can be found off Enticing Reward. Having the ability to pull top target off of Enticing Reward, also having a heal that I could fit into the curve easier, where client's a lot more action intensive and is harder to establish. Having the ability to get a 6 heal or even a 4 heal fit into the curve and finding it with Enticing Reward is very powerful against Sabine, so that's part of the reason, the reason why I ended up going with 1 top target instead of 3 client in the main, even though it's pretty much always 3 client after side against everything, including Sabine. And another reason why is I don't want to add another unit to lower Greedo hit rate. So like the third client can be in the main deck anyways with the top target, but then that's lowering Greedo hit rate, which is another big reason, a big thing that I was trying to prioritize against the Sabine matchup. The 7th Fleet Defenders are a tool to actually close games against Sabine and help stabilize the space arena. And more importantly, because there was a predicted uptick in space aggro, which we did see there were 2 space aggro decks in the top 8, and there were a lot floating around. 7th Fleet also really helped into those. The third Make an Opening really helps into that. So overall, I was very happy with this list. I definitely think I could have won the event. Like I said, it would have probably been about a 50-50 into the Sabine rematch against Chrono if the bracket went as it was supposed to. And if Alex did end up playing the Han 1 yellow, ended up playing the Boba red, that is favored into Boba red, so there's a chance Boba red won. So like I was very happy with this deck. I definitely think it could have won the event. I would have liked to see what would have happened if the top 4 finished as it was supposed to, but we are where we are. I will be probably writing an article about this deck soon if things line up how I want them to. It's just a question of time and when I can get it done. And in that article, I will talk about potential set 3 updates. I may also do a video on it for set 3 updates. Anyways, I guess this is still short at 27 minutes. I guess this is so short for me, because my videos normally run like 50 minutes, but I got it down like 20, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed. Please, like, comment, subscribe, follow, whatever it's called on YouTube, cringe YouTube stuff, if you enjoyed the video, because it helps with the algorithm, as they say. And may the cards be with you. Have a good one.